understand the word they're saying.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Don't
That's why
forget.
we have the Lester Porter. We are in Columbia, Ohio, with the reunion in 1997. It is August 28th. My name is Michelle Colvin, and we will get started. Mr. Porter, where were you born?
Dublin, Georgia,
And what year was that?
1924, December 27th.
Okay. What were your parents like? What did your father do?
Well, my father was an attorney, but he died when I was 12 years old. Mother was a school teacher.
Do you remember, you lived in Georgia, so what did you do for fun there?
For what?
For fun, as a
For
child?
fun. Now then,
As a child?
as a child. In a small town, a southern town, after the Depression, nobody had much money, but we had each other. And we had the best time. I had a lot of family. We had a little bit of city living. We had a lot of country living. We had a lot of pets. We had a chicken yard. I milked a cow through high school. We had a series of cows that we raised our family. My grandfather Porter had some cows, and when our cow would dry up, we would go and get a fresh cow and bring it to Dublin, and I would milk it on the way to school, and then I'd take my bucket and leave it at the cow pen, and go to football practice, come back and milk the cow on the way home. And we just had a lot of animals, a lot of hunting, a lot of fishing, a lot of friends. Never locked the door. It didn't occur to us that anybody would bother anything. All the kids played in and out of the neighborhood, out of each other's houses like they were owned. In the small town, it's kind of like the whole family is responsible for the children. If I misbehaved, it wasn't long before some of the ladies told Mama. If their kids misbehaved, Mama would tell their Mama. And it was, you didn't need a police force, you had a Mama force. And we went through high school, played in the band, played football. Had 1 year at a military college, North Georgia College, after I left high school. Had a good time at North Georgia College. It was at the Lonagar up in the mountains, and you could get out and run over Crown Mountain. You get out of chemistry class with your lungs full of chemicals, and put on your shorts and run up Crown Mountain, across the top, and back down through the drill field. And in this military college, we had a girls' dormitory that we called the barn. That's where the cows were. But it was a very close, a very loving college. We had a good time. About 1 year, the war had cranked up and was going, and we left and joined the Army at age 18.
You said your mother was a teacher. What did she teach?
She taught the 6th grade and the 7th grade, and it wasn't like being just a math teacher. She taught. They all taught several different courses. But again, in a small town, the teachers knew all the students, and they knew the parents, and the parents knew the teacher. And it was just kind of nice.
How many siblings did you have?
I had a sister, but again, the families looked after each other. My Uncle Rose's wife died, and he had 3 girls. And one of the other relatives said, let's each one take a girl, and Daddy said, no, we won't separate the girls. So Mama took the 3 girls, and there was me and sister, so we actually had 5. But there was sister and me, and then 3 other ladies, girls, were there before I was born, so I never knew the difference. And we grew up loving each other, and they was just like sisters, and it's been a very close family. And then when Aunt Mary died, Mama took Robert and Billy and Margaret for a while. Then Uncle Doc married again, and they went back home. Then when Uncle Tal's wife died, Mama took Nanny Claire, and she lived with us for a while. And then she grew up, went off to college. And the families just looked after each other. We had 2 gardens. We had a farm. Uncle Roy and Uncle Henry kept us in. We kept the kids and the family. Mama looked after them. And when they didn't have any money, we had just plenty of food. nobody felt poor. Nobody else had any money. Uncle Roe and I can't do one, but they would go kill a turkey for Thanksgiving, and Mama would cook it, and the family would eat at our house. And when it was time for, back then, hog killing time, they would kill some hogs, and we usually had some help, and they would cut up the meat and make cracklings. If you boil the lard, there's always little pieces of lean meat on the lard, and you made your lard, and then you had cracklings that you used for flavoring, and bacon, and I don't know. It was just a different world back then, but it wasn't bad. We grew up happy children.
You said there wasn't a lot of money. Was that as a result of the Depression, or?
Well, the Depression,
area?
sure, nobody had any money. A nickel bought a lot, and in Georgia at that time, when Mother started teaching, the state of Georgia was broke too, and they gave you a promissory note called scrip, and the grocery stores and clothing stores would accept the state promissory note and turn it into the state for their money when it was available. So Mama taught school for a lot of months, just a government scrip, a promissory note from the state of Georgia to pay her salary. So we just didn't need much cash. We didn't buy fish bait, we dug our own fish bait. And we hunted. When we went out and killed some squirrels, we ate them. And if you killed a duck, you ate it. And you kept chickens, and we had eggs. And it was, Daddy, we had 2 gardens, and people call him, said, Colonel, called lawyers Colonel. They said, people are stealing your beans. And he said, that's okay, I planted enough for them to steal some. I mean, it was okay. But once he picked it, he didn't want you to bother it. And he got up one night, and it's very unusual in a small town. He was going to get a drink of water. There was a bathroom and a refrigerator on the back porch, and the door from the bathroom opened on the back porch. It was kind of a breezeway toward the kitchen. And Daddy opened the door, and there was a man looking in the refrigerator, a strange man in the middle of the night. And the man ran out of the door. And Daddy got real mad and got his shotgun, and he said, that man saw that ham. And back then, food was food. He says, he's coming back and get that ham. And he got his shotgun and sat on the bathtub. And he sat there all night long, waiting for the man to come back and get the ham. And Mama got in bed and went back to sleep. And when talking about it later, this is after the war, we'd all grown up, and they were saying, Ruth, Mama's name, how on earth could you get back in the bed and sleep when Colonel was going to blow that man in two out by the refrigerator? And she said, I wasn't worried. I put the ham out on the back porch so the man could get it without getting shot. So Daddy stood there going to the refrigerator with no ham in it all night. Mama went back to sleep and didn't tell him anything about it. But the man never came back and got the ham. It was still there the next morning. None of the dogs or anything else. Anyway, so food was kind of precious back then. Anyway, that's more than you wanted to know. But it's some of the way people lived. When I came home after the war, I got back to Dublin in the middle of the night. And I walked up and I said, if the front door's locked, Dublin's changed. But I opened the door and walked in the middle of the night. You just didn't lock up things. Okay.
How old were you when you entered the service?
18 years old.
And was that by your choice or by the government?
Well, everyone was being drafted, but 2 or 3 of us wanted to go together. So we volunteered, and they accepted us with the Selective Service Board. And we went to Fort McPherson, Atlanta, together, and never saw each other again. So when you wanted to go and serve together, it didn't mean that you would serve together. But that's how we got in. We wanted to go together.
And you did basic training there, or?
No, we went out to Tyler, Texas, at Camp Fannin. And it was in the rose. Tyler's the rose sun of the world. And we held maneuvers all through the big rose gardens. And the artillery would just blow roses up in the air. The strangest thing. And they would kill going Gladewater around Tyler. And There was, we had a grand time in Tyler. There was a business girl sorority that kind of adopted, different units would adopt different parts of soldiers that were all young and 18, and the ladies were young and 18. And every Friday and Saturday night they would have a dance or have something that we could go to. And it was real nice. Then I broke my foot just before I finished training and had to take it all over again. And then we went to the College of Mines and Metallurgy in El Paso, Texas in engineering, an Army Specialized Training Course. And we stayed there about 2 or 3 semesters, and then the service decided they needed more fighters than brains, so they took a lot of people out of the Army Specialized Training and sent 1,100 of us to the 12th Army Division. And I heard something like 29 or 30 came home without a Purple Heart or being hurt out of that bunch. C Company had a tremendous number of them that got.
Did you go to Camp Barkley then?
We went to Camp Barkley, and it's a great outfit. The Army divisions replaced the cavalry. With the advent of the machine gun, horses were obsolete as far as America was concerned. The Germans, the Europeans still had a bunch of horse-drawn units. But it's a very, the Germans kind of developed the system called the Blitzkrieg, which is the lightning war, where they could go through Poland in a week. You crank up your tanks and half tracks with a lot of firepower and a lot of armor, and you just go over everything. And that's what we were. It's an army division. It was formidable.
How long were you in training at Barkley?
Seemed like it was about approximately a year, give or take. I really don't know how many months. Then we went to Camp Fanning and shipped out of New York and to Scotland, down to England, Tidworth Barracks. I don't know if anybody's mentioned Tidworth, where we stayed. Went to on pass out to Salisbury, England, saw Salisbury Castle and this kind of thing. Across the English Channel and landing barges.
How was the travel overseas?
I don't know if you can imagine or not. We were in the Empress of Australia, was the name of our ship. It was an old ship. And we were in a tremendous convoy that went through the North Sea. And there would be many, many soldiers, troop ship. And you would just have a hammock and a hammock and a hammock and a hammock, and you would throw your duffel bag in, and 2 feet above you would be another man, and 2 feet above you would be another man, and 2 feet above you would be another man. And they would feed us twice a day. They would give us sandwiches and stuff, one, and then give us some fruit and stuff and something to drink another time. And you could keep your fruit, and a lot of people kept it, and they would sell it. And other people would pay. I mean, you're on the thing, money means nothing, and they would pay fabulous amount of money for your oranges or your bananas or whatever had been passed out for the day. And sometime you would get out on troop deck, and there would be on the deck, and there would be a submarine drill. Now that is a terrifying thing, to be in the North Sea with the freezing water, all of these slow-moving ships and the wolf packs out there, the German submarines. And during these, they would always fire their guns to make sure that they were shootable. And so you would hear the submarine alarm, and then you would hear the firearms, and if you were down 2 or 3 decks, you didn't know what the devil was going on. And it was interesting. If that's the kind of travel you're talking about, a lot of men on a small space.
What did you do for entertainment while you were traveling?
In Camp Shanks, I had bought 2 files, and I put one in the coals of a fire, and as the fire went out, it cooled slowly all night and took the temper out of the files. So I put one in, and I took the other file, and all the way over to England, I was filing on that piece of metal, and I made a double-edged knife. But it takes a long time to take one file and file another file down that you have taken the temper out of to make a knife. But a lot of times you'd go up on deck, they would exercise you. They would take one group up and you would exercise, and they would bring another group and you would exercise, and another group and you would exercise. And then there was a lot of leisure time. You would write letters, or we'd sit up there with your friends and talk, just like this. A lot of times you didn't have to do something every minute. You were just getting there.
What was the emotion like? Was there a lot of tension, anxiety going over, or were they just real excited and can't wait?
I don't remember any emotion. We had a job to do and we were going to do it. I don't remember a lot of any wailing. I don't remember any people running off. I don't remember them trying to get sick. Most of these were patriotic men. We were part of an outfit. We were part of a group. We had our friends. We depended on them. They depended on us. We just got on the ship and went. I don't really remember any emotion. It was just another day's work.
So you felt pretty well trained?
Yes, we did. I think we had real good training. There's no training like the first battle that you lose. We lost our first battle, big battle, and were reduced to 1/3 combat efficiency.
Where was that at?
That's when you lose 2/3 of your men and all your tanks.
No, where was that at?
That was at Steinwall Forest and Hurlesheim. You'll hear that. That's where we learned to fight.
So what did you think of the Tidworth Barracks? How would you explain those two?
Of the what?
The Tidworth Barracks. Tidworth?
Oh, barracks. Oh, in England.
Mm-hmm.
That was another experience. We had landed up in Scotland, had gone down in England closer to the English Channel, and there were many tents set up that would hold anywhere from 8 to 10 to 12 to 16 men. And you were not supposed to dig any holes in the Queen's earth and bury your garbage or go to the bathroom, and you were not supposed to cut the Queen's wood and build a fire and get warm. And they would come out and say, "You're not permitted to do that." And you would say, "Okay, if you're man enough, stop us." If you had some garbage to bury, you had to put it somewhere, and when they didn't always have good bathroom facilities. If you want to appreciate America, you go anywhere else in the world and look at the water, the food, the cleanliness, and the bathroom and the communication system. You'll be glad to get home. One of my sons, he came back and bought my practice. I'm an optometrist. When he graduated from optometry school, he came back and looked at me and said, "Dad, you look pretty good. I'd like to see the world." And I said, "Well, everyone needs to see the world." And he joined the Air Force, was at Oklahoma City for a while. And since he was single, he accepted a remote assignment. He went to Korea. And in Korea, after he'd been in Korea 15 months, Dublin looks good. When you hear a lot of commotion and people are chasing a cat, it's not because the cat got out, it's because somebody's going to eat it. There's a lot of student unrest. They were gassing the streets. They went up and fought on the demilitarized zone. And he met a young lady there. And she was a lady physician in the men's Air Force. And they decided to come back, and she liked Dublin, and they wanted to get married. So Jerry is a family practitioner. That's his wife from Minnesota. But when he got, Dublin may have been just a small southern town before he went to Korea, but when he got back for 15 months in Korea, Dublin looked good. And he's there now. So Tidworth, being in the Queen's country where the Queen's soil can't be dug into without permission and the Queen's wood can't be cut without permission, but they were nice to us. I had a good time in England.
What, can you remember the first battle that you were involved in once you got over?
Depends on what you call a battle. We had first committed an action, and we were in reserve for a battle going on with someone else down in the valley below us. And we had been told to dig in along the ridge, because if the battle went badly, we were supposed to go down and hold the line. And you could see as the infantry moved across the bottom of the valley, the machine guns would cut down some, the artillery would cut down. We were sitting up there like watching a movie at the panorama as they moved from their positions into the opposing woods, but across an open area. And we were busy digging up on the horizon, and we knew better than to get on the skyline, but that's where they told us to dig. And I had the hole about half dug when the German artillery started coming in on us. And having the hole half dug, I was trying to make the decision whether to put my tail in the hole and get my head blown off, or put my head in the hole and get my tail blown off. And I looked down the line to see what the other soldiers were doing, and the decision was about 50-50. Does that count for your first battle?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And we went on up and went through a few little French towns, replaced the 4th Armored Division in one of them, and that went pretty well.
Okay, hold on before I just move this one. To a better place.
Yes, I wondered.
Is it off now?
No,
Oh,
we're gone.
okay.
Okay.
So where did you specialize in?
In the armored infantry, we were armored infantrymen. And in basic training, you learn to do a little bit of everything, because everybody loses a few people and other people have to do what they were doing. But basically, we were armored infantry. Rifles, machine guns, mortars, this kind of thing.
What did you think of the Battle of Hermannstein?
Like I said, you learn a lot. What most people don't know is after the bulge in the north, that the Germans, there was to be a bulge in the south. The textbooks don't teach you that. Down at Strasbourg, the Americans had just driven the Germans out of Strasbourg. A lot of the French people were then supporting the Americans, and they sent us down, and the information that we got was that there were a few old men and young men, kind of a scraggly bunch, that we were supposed to drive back in the Rhine River by 9 o'clock one morning, 8 o'clock one morning, whatever. We didn't know that there were 6 divisions had moved across the Rhine River there that was supposed to be the southern arm of the bulge in the north. So we didn't have good information, but we were learning. And you will hear a lot of criticism about American officers. If you read The Other Side of Time, that book, you'll hear that. But we don't have a military hierarchy like Germany that's supposed to know everything to do in a war. Our captains were insurance salesmen, school teachers, lawyers, carpenters, farmers. I mean, these were not soldiers. They were good men. They had learned some of the basic principles, but it took us a while to acquire the hardness that's required in the killing business. Unlike Vietnam, we were given the reason that we were going to war. The Axis powers, Germany had already gone to the English Channel, and they were determined to go up through the North Sea to Norway. And the Russians that finally ended up going into Finland, I think. Mussolini had gone into North Africa, had already gone all the way down through Ethiopia, was getting ready to take the African continent. Rommel and the American troops on North Africa were going to the Indian Ocean. So as the Germans went to the English Channel, they crossed the Mediterranean and Africa. They were going to the Indian Ocean. Southern Africa would be indefensible. The Japanese had already gone into China. They had come through Korea, and they were coming around the Malaysia Peninsula through Malaysia. They were getting ready to take over the world. Germany was sinking ships off Savannah. The German submarines, it was a situation that we had to do something about. So we knew that we had something we had to take care of. It wasn't an unknown reason to fight. And so our training was good, our equipment was good, but we had to learn. It's extremely difficult to acquire the hardness that's required in soldering. And unfortunately, all doctors in learning kill a few. All officers who have to take authority and send other men out to get killed or kill they make some mistakes. You don't always have all the information that you want. And if you did have, there's someone on the other side who is committed to upsetting your plan. So you have this commitment on the other side and you have your commitment on your side. Neither one of you knows what the other's going to do. And after it's done, everybody says you did it wrong. But these were good men. They were doing the best they could. We got some people hurt. There's no other way to learn that kind of thing. So the Battle of Herlisheim, we sent people in with some open flanks. That was bad. It was not armored country. We had some rivers running through frozen marshes that you could not get the tanks and your armor up to support your infantry. We did not know that we would run into 6 divisions, and C Company and the 56th Armored Infantry Battalion got into Herlisheim, and they got cut off in the night, and they lost a heap of people. As the battle grew, and we were sent into Steinwall Forest, our tanks had moved out, and the battle was such that you used up all of your bullets and all of your ammunition. And they had nothing to shoot and nothing to ride, so a lot of them had to give up or get out and walk back. So what would you say about a battle where you ran into more than you could bite off, more than you could chew? You didn't have all the facts, but nobody has all the facts in a battle. I've got the literature where the man says, we went up against 6 divisions and we survived. And after that, we were mean as hell. And when we went up and joined Patton from Ludwigshafen, from Luxembourg to the Rhine, Patton wanted 4 armor divisions. He had 3. He borrowed us from the 7th Army. We took off all the markings and went up and put 8 task force abreast. And you could look back at the end of the day. He said, head for the Rhine River and don't look back. And when we would go, our ammunition in the 50 calibers was 1 red bullet, 2 black bullets, and 2 green bullets. And that's a tracer. You could see every 5th bullet. 2 were armor piercing and 2 were incendiary. The green ones were incendiary. And we would go through a town, we would shoot in all the windows and all the doors so nobody would be there to throw a hand grenade or a Panzerfaust to get in those things and to shoot out of them. So when we went to town, we would shoot. And those incendiary bullets would stick in the rafters and windowsills and doors and wherever. And at the end of the day, from one horizon to the other, as far as you could see, it's a burning town. So I think Herlisheim was necessary. We took a lot of punishment, but we did stop 6 divisions. I can show you the write-up in our history, what we went up against from time to time and how it finally, in every football game almost and in every battle, there's a time when 2 almost equal forces meet. And there's this terrible going on between them. And at some point, one begins to win and one begins to lose. And the one that's losing knows it's going to lose, and the one that's winning knows it's going to win. But it has to go on to the end. And they call us a suicide division. It wasn't because we intended to be suicidal. It was because we didn't know what we were doing and kept on doing it. But it wore them down, you see. And the secret is to have people, if you don't know what you're willing to die for, you don't know what you're living for. Right? A lot of people don't know they don't know what their priorities are. Mine worked out: God, country, family, me. You know, if you loved your family more than you did your country, that was easy. The Germans would take your little boy and your wife and say, if you don't betray your country, we'll kill your wife and child. So you say, no, I will betray all my friends in the French underground to save my wife and child. But that's not the end of it. They keep on doing it. So you have to decide whether if you love your God, they can't make you betray him. They can make you say things, but you really don't betray him. And if you don't love your country more than you do yourself and your family, there's got to be something bigger to live for. Or to us at our time, what we loved it enough to die for it. And I've made several talks recently. The Exchange Club had a day when they presented the Freedom Wall to East Lawrence High School, and it had the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, some of our great documents. And they asked me to come and talk on the price of freedom. And we hand this generation and those high schools, we hand them freedom on a platter. No other world has it like this. And yet, I suspect 1 out of 10 can't stand the freedom, the self-determination, and they will end up in prison. They will throw away their freedom because they won't follow the rules for success. Rules for failure, rules for success, whether it's in the army, or whether it's in a battle, or whether it's in life, or whether it's in business, or whether it's in your personal life, are pretty clear. I'm going to preaching now. But what are the principles that you live and die for? What do you love enough to die for? Sometimes you will have to sit down and think where your values are. So, Herleshheim, I've got one of the pictures from C-66 got a book. There are 68 soldiers we could not recover the bodies from the ice at Steinwell Forest. The ice melted and they fell through, and there's a picture of the grave registration band standing out there looking at the bodies, and they all wrapped around. We had mattress covers on for camouflage on the ice, and it's wrapped all around the bodies, and there's 68 of them, and they were trying to consider whether there was an atrocity because they were all shot in the face and head. And when you're standing up, you get shot through this way. When you are lying down, look at the enemy, you get shot the long way. And there was no atrocity there. They just caught us on the ice, and they had a turkey shoot. And sometimes we caught them on the ice, and we had a turkey shoot. But we had this problem. They were always in position, and we were always coming at them. If you're coming after me, I get the first shot. I'm going to hurt you. We had to take care of that, and it's written up in the division history. We had our mobile artillery that would go with us. And there's a write-up in the 12th Armored Division history where an old soldier from North Africa and a young soldier is in front of our division as it approaches. And the old soldier says, for God's sake, don't shoot at those people, because in 10 minutes all the artillery in the world is going to come down on you. And they were asking him how long before it came down, and he said 4 minutes. So we were coming at you, and you got the first shot if you dared to take it. And we always got hurt first. But getting hurt is one thing, doing the job's another. Keep going. I don't know if that's what you were talking about. We learned a lot at Herleshheim.
Can you remember a specific instance with the battle, maybe where you were injured or you had an emotional involvement? A friend got hurt or something? You can give us a detail of what happened.
It's the strangest thing in the world to live through a losing battle. As long as you're winning, going forth, they are paying. People are coming along behind and picking up the pieces, and it's not so bad. But when you're losing a battle, I don't remember any emotion or any hollering or screaming like you see in the movies or like you see in Vietnam even. We moved out before daylight over a frozen marsh as hard as this floor and as smooth as this floor. The bullets would carry just on and on. And before daylight, the Germans heard us. We didn't get in position. They heard us and raked the field with machine gun fire, and that cut a lot of people down immediately. When the firing time, we all would go to the ground, and you wouldn't stand up and go. You would go on your elbows through the snow. And you ask what I felt. I thought, this is not a good place to be. People, when they stopped us, and the machine guns cut a lot of people down, and then the artillery started coming in on us, and when artillery would hit in the mud, the shells would go up, the shrapnel. When the shells would hit on the ice, it's like hitting on a concrete. They would go like that, and it just cut things. And there's a thing. And then as the daylight came, and we were still pinned down on the ice, the way they pin you down is everybody has a final protective line. At night, you get a couple of machine guns or whatever you got, and you get them in a crossfire on some level terrain. So you can't go back and you can't go forward. And that was our situation. And then the artillery was coming down. You couldn't stand up and move. You'll hear some of them that tried it. And then when the fog lifted and the daylight came, and you're out there, a target, and you're only 200 or 300 yards or less from the dug-in positions. And I have a lot of respect for the German rifles and its ability to shoot straight for 200 or 300 yards at a target big as a man. And then when the shrapnel hit me, I was up and moving and it knocked me down, but I didn't know I'd been penetrated. And I was lying there looking for, we could see the enemies moving in the hedgerow in front of us. And I rolled over for some reason, and I felt all the inside of my clothes were wet, and I had not done anything ridiculous. So I knew that I was leaking, and you don't know how bad. And I've asked hundreds of people, all shrapnel and all bullets are extremely hot. You can't pick them up when it's. And I don't remember a soul that remembers the heat of the shrapnel or the heat of a bullet. Apparently, the trauma is so great that it deadens nerves. And if you ask people, you might ask what they felt when the shrapnel hit. And people were hurt all around you. They were moaning and groaning. One, I thought a bullet had gone through his white phosphorus grenade because he was lying on it and it was bubbling and he was groaning. White phosphorus, when air gets to it, burns. And some of the other fellows, they thought the Germans had shot a white phosphorus shell that had made him fall, and he was on it. But there were people just shot through and through in all directions all over the field. And there's a principle that tell you, the walking wounded, please evacuate yourself. There are only so many letter bearers to take care of the more seriously wounded. This is just the SOP of a battle, the standard operating procedure. And since I didn't know what all had been hurt, when I started crawling back, my helmet jumped off. And I realized I'd been selected as a target by one of the German riflemen. A bullet had hit it and knocked it off. And I put it back on and started moving again. And being shot with a bullet going straight through you, we all didn't want to get shot that way, but we particularly dreaded spinning bullets. And the bullets would hit this snow and would go just all over the place. They would just keep going when they hit. And he missed me 2 more times, and then for some reason stopped shooting. And I've not heard anyone else that remembers, but the snow was about that deep, and I must have been down in it about that far and sticking up about this far, and was moving back to the aid station. And the trail that I was moving up was red with blood from the people that had gone ahead of me. I haven't heard to anyone else who remembers the red trails through the snow. So you ask what was I thinking about when I got wounded. You may not have wanted to know all that. But it's just everybody, you keep doing your duty. There's no place to go and nothing else to do. You think Americans, they should have blown a whistle like in a football game and stopped it and had somebody come out there and get me. but nobody blew the damn whistle. The war kept going on. People, you would get shot 5 or 10 or 15 times. Those German soldiers in prepared position in daylight, just picking targets. Every time you move, you'd get hit again. And some of them will tell you they got hit several times, or were afraid to move, or their friend moved and he ended up dead. Excuse me. Okay, now where we going here?
Where were you injured?
Pardon?
Where were you injured?
Where would people keep asking that, and I tell them about a mile west of the Rhine. The shell landed behind me, and the shrapnel hit the left gluteus muscle, which is right in your butt. If you pardon that expression. But fortunately, the shrapnel did not penetrate the bones. See, it could have gone through your hip bone, through your intestines, through everything else. But if you look at some of the trees where shrapnel have just cut them to shreds, you realize what shrapnel can do. It cuts off arms, legs, pieces, nose, everything. Went back to the aid station, and they give you some stuff for pain and stop the bleeding and that kind of thing. And the train back to the Dijon hospital was completely filled. And it had, again, like the troop ship, stretcher, 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 stretcher. And there would be 4 or 5 people on either side, just a full train full of wounded people going back. And Madeline Carroll was the, I'll call her a hostess lady, whatever you call them, but she would go up and down and give you a cookie or talk to you or something. Madeline Carroll was a very beautiful movie star at the time, a blonde person. Went back to Dijon Hospital, and it was also in a courtyard, and the courtyard was filled with litters of wounded soldiers that hadn't been carried inside, and they came down off the train and the little thing that carried, and they fell down and spilled me off the stretcher. And they got on it and put me back on it and hauled me back in there. Fortunately, it was not that serious wound. It didn't penetrate all the bones and cut everything in two inside.
So it was a short recovery.
Short recovery. 30 days later, I was back with the outfit. I thought, having seen this thing, that you would appreciate it a little more.
Yeah.
How are we doing time-wise? Are we going okay?
We're doing fun.
What did you do for fun? Do you remember any time during the war where you just had to release?
As you talk to these men, except for the shooting war, getting hurt and your friends getting killed, we had a blast. We had a wonderful time. If you got to fight a war, fight it in Europe. There were all kind of stuff to drink. Now, I don't know where it came from because there wasn't much food. The retreating army eats up everything it can find along the way. The advancing army eats up everything it can find along the way. I don't know what the people eat, and a lot of them didn't have much to eat. And we kept the half tracks. We found all kind of cognac, Calvados, schnapps, port, Bordeaux, vermouth, banana brandy, sherry brandy, gin. We did a lot of drinking in Europe and a lot of partying. And we kind of had food, and every 4 or 5 kilometers was another little town. And sometimes, even if we were pulled back out of a battle, we would go hunting. They had some little deer and they had some wild hogs. We'd go hunting, shoot them, and eat them. And we'd eat the chickens. We would cook stuff. They had ducks and geese, and we would get it and eat it. We would get their food and their cameras and their guns as we were just going through the countryside. I don't remember any of our men that got involved or bothered any of the ladies. They were always there in every town. When you go through the town, there's a bunch of civilians come from somewhere. They would all go down in the basement. Or they had holes dug around the town, and when we were coming, they would go out and get in the holes. And the Germans, the old men and the young boys would wear this gray uniform just like the soldiers, a kind of a gray clothes. And you would take a town and look out there, and you would see people in foxholes. And you would take your white phosphorus from your grenades and your mortars, and white phosphorus would burst and go down in the holes, and they would have to come out. And when they did, you shoot them. That's where you get them out of a hole with white phosphorus. And we found that in taking these little towns, we would go and take the first street, and then we would spread out and clear the town that way. But the Germans would run from one town to the next, and we'd fight the same people over and over. So we soon quit that. We would take one town and go clean, one street and go clean through the town and spread out and clear them this way. And then we didn't have to fight them at once. But when we would go out, they would always hear us coming. There was always some movement, either civilians or soldiers, that would go out, and they would be trying to run from one town to the next, or they would go out and get in those foxholes. And we would get in the windows, which were like pillboxes. And when they would come up, we'd shoot them. Your rifle was good for 200 or 300 or 400 yards with a target this big. If you've got any brothers who hunt and shoot, if they shoot a 270 or something at 100 or 200 yards, they expect to hit a target this big. But a man, you can get him a long ways. And so we just go through the town, spread out, shoot everything on the other side of town, then clear it this way. Nearly got killed in one town, but it wasn't by soldiers. We had gone, and this was when we were going and taking the first part of town, and we got out and we were clearing houses. It was an agricultural region. And I went into the basement, and I heard some commotion, some movement in a room. And I was yelling, "Rouse, rouse, Snell, come out fast." Nothing happened. Hollered again, nothing happened. Hollered again, nothing happened. Well, these are not civilians. So we have HE, high explosive grenades, which are concussion grenades, and we have fragmentation grenades, which are those things that you see with serrated that make shrapnel. So I took one of the HE grenades, pulled a pin, opened the door, and tossed that thing into the room. And this poor farmer had brought all of his pigs in and put them in that room. And when that grenade went off, they hit the door, and the door hit me and knocked me clean across the other side, dropped my rifle. Those pigs came out and ran all over me. Helmet went one way. It was awful. Nearly killed me, but you just don't think of things like that when the darn pigs come flying out from the concussion grenade, huh?
Do you remember what town that was?
No, I haven't the slightest idea.
What involvement did you have with the civilians?
With the civilians?
Mm-hmm. Do you remember a story?
Every time you stopped, you had involvement with civilians. It was their houses, and we were in them.
Did you get close to any of them, though?
No. I don't remember any personal involvement. There were people there, and the French people. And I've got some of the references in the literature that we have here. They have been afraid to speak for several years. Your child would turn you in, your neighbor would turn you in. You didn't know. And when we liberated them, it was just the greatest exhilarated feeling. They would go around saying, da 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 da, I'm free, I don't have to be afraid anymore. And it was just the most fabulous thing. And the French people, great, they would be out there with wine and everything greeting us. And the Germans had a different kind of relationship. They didn't know what we do, and we didn't know what they would do. I don't remember any people. We didn't. In my generation, we were taught ladies are untouchables. You just don't bother them, And I don't know anybody that got involved after the war. We all had friends, but doing the movement and doing the shooting, except for being nice to each other, I don't remember much personal involvement. I don't know how much you get in the interviews of people, but I don't remember too much of it.
Yeah, we've gotten quite a few personal interviews with.
Now, Muscles, Emery, married a young lady from Belgium, but I think he met her after the war. A lot of people got married, they had sweethearts after the war when you had time to sit down and get to know each other.
So what were you doing the day that they announced that the war was over?
I've got the letters. You mean we're in Europe or the Japanese war?
No, when you were in Europe.
Well, we had one whale of an adventure. We had gone with Patton to Ludwigshafen, At Ludwigshausen, we had a dual purpose 88 level off on our half tracks. They shot the lead Jeep with Lieutenant Moore, came back and got the 5th one, came back and shot the 10th one, and went back and shot every other half track. Came back and missed us as we backed back into town. At Ludwigshausen, then we went up and crossed at Worms, and then we went up to Wurzburg, then we went over to Schweinfurt. Stories about each one of these towns. And then we went over to Munich, and they sent, I believe Munich and Nuremberg, the mayor sent word out and said he surrendered, not to shoot the town down anymore. Somebody finally shot at us, and we went on bypassed it. The armor's job wasn't to stay and clear. We had armored infantry divisions coming behind us doing the picking up for us. And as we had moved, we had finally learned to move armored style. We quit that getting out and walking across the ice. We would take our armor with us. And then we got some airplanes that was assigned to our outfit. And as we would be going along a Task Force A, Task Force B, and one in reserve, if this one would hit something, this one would come get it. If this would hit something, this one would come get it. If it was very much, we would radio our airplanes and designate the target with smoke, and you'd look back and see 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, however many yellow-tailed thunderbolts coming. We would indicate the target. They would form this tremendous circle on the target. This one would strafe and bomb. This one would strafe and drop his bomb, and he was strafing to protect this one's tail. This one would strafe, and that whole circle would strafe the whole outfit, dropping their bombs, and then they would radio us, go get them. With our tanks and half tracks, we would fly through them and not even pick up the pieces. We had infantry coming along behind us to pick up the pieces, you see. And our job, Hitler wanted to get 1.5 million Germans out of North Italy through Brenner Pass to fight in Berchtesgaden. Our job was to bottle them up in Brenner Pass, and we were headed for the Enns River Valley, Innsbruck and Brenner Pass. We were at Oberau and Oberammergau at the end of the war, which was down in the Bavarian Alps. And 2 or 3 days before the war, they kind of held us up, and it was the sickest feeling in the world to get an assignment and get, thinking you might get killed 2 days before the end of the war, or wounded 2 days before the end of the war. But they held us up, and then they told us it would be over in a day or two, so we kind of quit pushing. Around May the 6th, May the 8th, the thing was over. And then you just, boy, this is funny feeling. Nowhere to go and nobody to shoot, and nobody's shooting at you. We were always afraid some of the Germans hadn't heard that the war was over, and that they still had their guns, and that you would be out walking around and get shot anyway. But everybody doesn't stop at the same time, even though they're supposed to. So what I was doing, we were doing the regular, safe Army things at the end of the war. We wouldn't let them get to us. We were not going to them, but we held up a couple of days before the end. Because every time we moved, they had what they call the Volksarmee, the People's Army, the old men and the boys. And they would go out and they would have 4 or 5 mortars. And that's a tube with a spike in the bottom. And mortar shell is an explosive shell. And it's got something like a shotgun cartridge in the back. And you pull a pin and you arm the darn thing. It's a big thing like this with a little tail on it. And they would have mortar shells, a row of them as high as that shelf, all the way across there. And they would have 3 or 4 little boys, and they would have the mortar already zeroed in on the road. I'm telling you more than you want to know.
No, please.
And you're going along and you hear toom, 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 and you would know that there would be 100 mortar shells in the air before the first one landed. And they usually did that on a narrow place, or where there was an incline, or where you couldn't get off the road, or if you were at a bridge. And you would just have to, it would start raining down on you, and if you could, you just had to keep moving and run out from under it. So the next thing that you would do when you got out of the mortar, on every mountaintop there was an 88 ACAC, German airplane shooting gun. Those darn 88s were clip-fed cannons that would shoot 5 at a time. With them on the peaks, and you coming down the valley, they would lower the gun on you. And you would get airburst all down your doggone column from these anti-aircraft guns. So we didn't want to move or provoke too much of that right at the end of the war, as you can understand why. There's no defense from it. I mean, if we could see it, then we could put a tank on it. We could stop it in a few minutes. But again, they got the clip off before you fast. Am I putting y'all to sleep?
No, not even a little bit. What you said, you mentioned that you had when you were talking about at the end, you said you were going through all the little German towns. Do you have like information did you write down a history of what happened in each one of those in your books? Or?
No, we couldn't write home too much stuff. It would be censored. However, Berlin Sally knew more about us than we did. She knew our names. She knew the wives. She knew the children. And when we were at Deligan Bridge, and I haven't been able to document this, I cannot prove it, but we kept German radios and we listened to Berlin Sally, and she played American music, so we would listen to her. And if you talk to some, ask if they listen to Berlin Sally and see what they remember. Because there are several times when she spoke to the division. And Schweinfurt was one that, I don't know if you want to hear about a town or if you just said, did I write? I did not keep it logged, but we have maps of where our division went. So we can look back and see the little town of Beachy. There was a college there. They also had the Maginot and the Siegfried line. The Siegfried, the pillbox was defending Germany, the Maginot, and it was a real tough time to get around with our armor. And the little college there, and there was some pretty bad fighting, and then all of us that fought at Beachy called ourselves Sons of Beachy. So we remember that, and I've got it in the Stars and Stripes, 2 articles where the 7th Army was fighting at Beachy. And Schweinfurt was another one. Again, did a foolish thing, and we knew better. They took us out of our half-track, out of our armor, set us as infantry, walking up an open field with a walking barrage where the artillery, as you proceeded, would shoot the woods on either side so people couldn't shoot you. But one of the artillery pieces traversed the wrong way, and a shell landed in the middle of us and hurt 2 or 3. We thought the Germans had us, but they didn't. But we went up behind Schweinfurt. And somebody reported that they had seen some troops moving into the woods behind Schweinfurt. And right about dark, the artillery came down on us, and it knocked out our radio, the first barrage. We had no way of contacting the people behind us. And the big 240s would come in every 15 minutes, and the 155s would come in every 10 minutes, and the smaller ones would come in every 5 minutes. And the tree burst and shelled us all night long. Now, I had already been back to the hospital. This is an interesting story. It may or may not be true, but it's interesting. The interpretation of the story. The story is true. The interpretation may or may not be the whole story. But they shelled us all night. People were wounded in the foxhole. Tree burst, just shrapnel just comes down and does everything. But I'd been back in the hospital. I'd been hit by something I couldn't see. You had been used to the little tender loving care. You'd gone back into this life-threatening situation. And there's something happens to you when you fall off a horse. And they say if you don't get back on the horse, you'll never ride again. You have this kind of fear. Well, you'd been in battle, been hurt, and when you went back, you would get up and do your duty, get back in the foxhole and put a jacket over your head. Not that it would protect you, but it just felt like you needed to do it. Anyway, I was still living with this pretty big fear type thing. Not afraid like irresponsible, but just a kind of a sick dread. Not really enough, doing your duty, not anything else. That kind of thing. Gone back into it. After it shelled us all night, I woke up hungry for the first time since I'd been hit. And I checked with some of the other men. I said, boy, we sure are hungry. And we found it was our own artillery that was shelling us. And it wasn't the division or the army, it was the Corps artillery. It was the big stuff, 2 or 3 units back. That's the reason it kept going. Nobody found out it was us or told them and stopped it. But, I mean, they shelled us bad. So I got 2 or 3 of them and said, I'm hungry. Let's go up here and take this part of town and get some food. And we went up there and shot it up and got some food. But from then on, there was never fear anymore. There was always a certain amount of apprehension, but not fear, bone dead level fear like we had known before. And you become an old soldier. And whenever we would get replacements, you acquire something at that point where you're a little bit faster and a little bit smarter or something, but we would lose in the next battle 8 new soldiers and 1 old soldier. In the next battle you would lose 10 new soldiers and maybe 1 or 2 old soldiers. You learn a survival and an effective instinct or something, whatever you want to call it. Went all that way to the end of the war. Just, it was kind of a good feeling, crazy. And I had a friend who was a psychiatrist, and I told him, you know, after being shelled all night, I was hungry, but I never was afraid again, not afraid like I had been before. And he said, fear is a product of civilization, and that man doesn't really dread being killed, but he does dread being maimed. That even the cavemen found out if they were not crippled or terribly disfigured, they did better with the ladies. They were able to compete better in the field, to provide food, to kill animals, to run, to do things if you were not maimed. And that civilization builds up this veneer of fear, which is a product of civilization in our people. And if the trauma is severe enough that it removes the veneer of civilization and you live on an animal level. Like a little dog run out and jump on a big dog, and you wonder, why does he do that? You know? Mm-hmm. And that same feeling has stayed with me the rest of my life. I've not lived with fear. I was mayor of Dublin during the integration years, and we had a lot of threatening situations. Had a lot of people that wanted it to work, white and black, and a lot of people who were helping us, trying to get through the thing in some kind of way, but we had some people who did not want it to work. And they would do bad things like threatening phone calls to the home, bomb threats to the home, false alarms to the fire department, shooting, call out the fire department to shoot at it. And they would come and see me, I was the mayor. And they would come in just in an emotional state, just almost uncontrollable. And I would say, look, I've been up against the best in the world, and we won. Now what's your problem? And it was the strangest thing, when people know that you're not afraid of them, they act differently. And that story may not be correct, that there is a veneer of civilization that we acquire, you know, with this dread of being maimed. And that if people go through enough, you remove this veneer and live on an animal level. And then we came home and went to college and met my wife, a great gal. And by putting us back in college, it gave us 2 or 3 years to become civilized again and settle down. We had something to do. We had to study. We had to make grades. You know, we had to get promoted. We had to get out and get a job. But by putting out of the 10 million, they probably put 5 million of us back in college and gave us the time to normalize again, because we were very much abnormal. Yes. Where did you start me talking then? What was the question?
Oh, the end of the war. Do you remember?
The end of the war?
Yeah. Do you remember, like, how did you celebrate? What did you do? Did you have a nice meal? Or?
We were down in the almost at Oberau, where they have the Passion Play. It's in Germany, and it is a resort for the German millionaires, the influential people. We were billeted in a house that had all of the different high-quality alcohol drinks in the world, and we drank them. And we laughed and we partied and we sang and the war was over, and we didn't have another problem. So we had this whole house full of good stuff to drink.
What did you do following the war once you returned to the States?
Came home at the University of Georgia. Charlie Trippi was playing football. They were the most wonderful years in the world. We were all 3 or 4 years older than the young ladies. The men had all been called away. And then the ones that had not been called away were young men and ladies 3 or 4 years younger than we were. And we partied a little too hard, I think, because of this wildness. I mean, we've been all over the world and we had done stuff. So I graduated from the University of Georgia with a Bachelor of Science degree. And I had talked to some of the men that I thought were successful in my hometown, what they would do after World War II. And Mr. Henry Thorpe said, Lester, sit down and just see what you like to do and see if you can find some way to make a living at it. He said, if you like the hardware business, come talk to me, but I got plenty of clock watchers down there. You know. And I decided, my family had been, Dad was a lawyer, and we had 2 uncles who were doctors, and another uncle was a lawyer. And I decided I wanted to be in healthcare, but the doctors, they had their own hospital, they delivered babies, they did surgery, they made house calls. They never had a second to themselves. So I wanted to be in healthcare, but I didn't want to be a GP. I wanted regular hours. I wanted to be my own boss. I don't like surgery. I did not like the degenerative diseases where you treat the senile people. They walk in and you give them all this medicine and do this test and they walk out and they're not any different. I don't like those long-term downhill treatments. And I love my dentist, but I didn't want to drill teeth all day. And I decided that pharmacy and optometry at that time were 2 of the neatest, cleanest professions in the healing art. And so I went to optometry school in Chicago after I finished the University of Georgia. And I had worked at the bank for a while before I went back to optometry school. With a BS degree, nobody pays you with just a BS degree. You've got to learn some trick that everybody else doesn't know. And when I learned to work on eyes, then people needed people to work on eyes, and I had something to do. Went back to a small southern town and had a family practice. And we didn't have the commercialism and the advertisement and this stuff. Then my examination fee was $5. I've been in practice since 1951, which is like 46 years. And a whole pair of bifocal glasses and a Bausch & Lomb frame was $25. And as inflation has come along, you know, everything has gone up. But people would pay $2 down and $2 a week, and they paid their bills, and we all made a living, and everybody was happy. And then around 1976, the world changed some way, and everybody became entitled to health care. And they would come and want to pay enough to get out of the office and never pay again. They were entitled to it. So you had to cut out your credit and become more business-like. But it was a great way to make a living, and we made a lot of people see. And my 3rd son said, Pop, if the other boys don't want to do it, I'd like to do it. The one who went to optometry school and he was a captain in the Air Force. You go in as a captain. So if you ladies want to go to optometry school and go in the Air Force and see the world, you go in as a captain. And it's a nice, clean way to make a living. And when Evan bought my practice after 51 to 45, 46 years, I joined the staff at the VA hospital. And they don't have an ophthalmologist there, and I take care of all the minor pathology. Optometrists we can prescribe antibiotics, and we can treat glaucoma. And we still do the vision examination. They dilate the pupils and check for diabetes and all of that. It's turned into a real neat little profession. But the corporations, they changed the laws where the states could no longer regulate professions. And then Walmart and Sears Roebuck and Kmart and every cut rate thing in the world buys them a doctor. And that, we lost some of the professionalism again. So we'll go into government health care when professionalism won't be the same. But decide what you like to do and find some way to make a living at it. You'll be glad you did. That's what I did after the war. And they told us in professional school, if you will get out of professional school and work as hard as you can, as long as you can, you will die filthy rich. But if you will put some back in your family, some back in your community, and some back in the profession, you will probably die happy. And so I went back to the small town, and I was mayor during the integration years. I told them I'd take it 2 terms if they'd have me.
Yeah, but
I was president of the Chamber of Commerce 2 terms after that. And I was state president of my professional association 3 terms. And I've lived a very blessed life. I don't know if that's what you wanted, probably more than you wanted to know when you said, what did you do when you came out of the service? What,
No, you're
what
very
time
helpful.
We're ready. We have plenty of time.
There was a couple things that I forgot to mention as the time progressed. The day that Pearl Harbor was bombed, do you remember where you were and what you were doing?
Yes, I do. Germany was already fighting in Europe. And our Congress, when you have more than 3 people on a committee, it's hard to get anything done. Half the congressmen knew that we had to help our friends in Europe, and the other half was scared to commit themselves. So we were sitting over here, half committed, half not. Lend-lease, that kind of stuff, give them the equipment, but not go. Then they started sinking ships. But when they bombed Pearl Harbor, I must have been 17. We were out on the playground in front of the house. The school was right across the street. And it was after lunch. And somebody came today, they bombed Pearl Harbor. Where's Pearl Harbor, you know? What's going on? And the whole nation was in a state of shock. These people had slipped up and bombed us like a thief in the night. And there was this tremendous surge of patriotism. Everybody wanted to get in and help wind the war down. I mean, volunteer lines just long down the street. And I brought the Stars and Stripes to tell you about the atom bomb. After we had wound up the war in Europe, I didn't quite have enough points, even after getting a Purple Heart, to come home. And we were scheduled to go for retraining and go to Japan. We had the 5th and 8th Air Force, 15th flying out of Italy and the 8th Air Force flying out of England. And we had been sending 1,000 plane raids on Berlin and Dresden, the oil centers, and we were killing 100,000 people a night in Berlin. If you ever see the Russians going into Berlin, stop and see what Berlin looked like after we had bombed it down on top of the people. We could have taken those 2 air forces and sent 1,000 plane raids on Japan. We were already in reach of Japan and were sending 1,000 plane raids on the paper houses and the high population density. They say there wasn't many whole windows left in Tokyo before the atom bomb. We could have taken 10 of our 14 army divisions that were already trained. We knew how to fight then, and we were conditioned. We had acquired the hardness and the meanness. And gone through that island, they might have killed 1 million of us going in. We'd have killed 10 million of them. And they had the type leader who didn't mind 10 million of their people getting killed. You see, Hitler was that type. He could have given up a year sooner, and the Russians wouldn't have killed several million of his people. Because if you look at some of the old pictures of the Russians coming in, they just killed everybody along the way. At the VA, I talked to some of the people who were liberated by the Russians, and they said the Russians would come in and kill everybody in town, and the people coming behind them with wagons, they resettled the town. Hitler didn't care how many got killed. And Hirohito, our people told the Japanese, if we are going to blow up one of your towns, if you don't surrender. And he sat there and let it happen. And we told him again, we'll blow up another town, and he sat there and let it happen. But it saved 1 million of us and at least 10 million of them. So, what was I doing at the end of the war?
Pearl Harbor.
Hmm? Pearl Harbor. Oh, what did I think with Pearl Harbor? There was this tremendous surge of patriotism. We had been offended and we didn't like it. And it gathered America like nothing has gathered it since. And I was on pass back in Paris. We had finished the war in Europe, and I was on pass in Paris for the first anniversary of the liberation of Paris. And that was a terribly wild party. The whole town came out and did that. And then when they dropped the first atom bomb, I was at Etretat, which was a little town on the English Channel. And we heard that the atom bomb was, what's that, you know. And then we went on across the English Channel, and I was in London when they dropped the second one, and it was VJ Day. And it was around 2 o'clock at night, and people poured out of the hotels and the houses in their pajamas and nightgowns, and everybody was dancing in the street and dancing in the fountains, and just it went on for about 3 days. England had sent their poor men. They had sent them into Europe. They sent them into North Africa. They had been hurt at Dunkirk. England didn't have any, but their men were coming home, those that were left. And I mean, you can't believe it. And the Americans were getting out of there. So those English people celebrated like you can't imagine. But I was there.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you had something to do with it.
Well, I feel like I've taken the responsibility. I've put some back where I live. And I feel like I've paid my dues and I'm entitled to speak. And in one of the council meetings, we had an Episcopal minister who came to Dublin. And he knew how to do everything. And he was up at the council meeting just telling us everything we were doing wrong and how we were such terrible people. And one of the councilmen had checked on it, and the man hadn't registered to vote. And he said, "Preacher, get out of here. If you're not registered to vote, we're not interested in anything you have to say." There's a price you pay for freedom and a responsibility you have to take. Mm-hmm. And if you put some back where you live, then you've got a right to stand up for the things that you believe in. And I learned, they say, what is a man supposed to be now? Everybody says a man doesn't know what a man's supposed to be. We're half feminized and half everything else. And I learned when I was 11 years old what a man was supposed to be. Trustworthy, loyal, friendly, courteous, kind, clean, cheerful, brave, religious. On every occasion when I have not lived up to the Scout laws, I have felt like less a man. So if you ever wonder what a man ought to be, you look at the Scout laws. I haven't always lived up to them, but I've always felt like less a man when I didn't live up to them. But this 12th Armored Division, when we get together, it's like brothers. There's not a stranger in the outfit. You'll be surprised how they stand and talk. And sometimes you'll go up to the room and they won't even be talking. They just be sitting there. We get something out of just being together. A unique bunch of people for a unique time in history. And we lost 230 people this year. We'll soon be gone.
How long have you been involved with the 12th Armored?
I didn't know that we had an association until about 10 years ago. And when I heard, I joined. And I've been to probably 4 or 5 of the meetings. And I'm the unit representative. George O'Brien was our great 66th Armored Infantry representative for years and years. But his health is beginning to fail, and George asked me to take it. And they've carried it for 50 years. See, 52 years ago, we fired our last shot. 52 years ago. And they've carried it this long, so I owe it something. I don't mind doing the work. And I'm not trying to be anything special. That's just the way it is.
Great. Did you have any questions?
I'm overwhelmed already.
I know it. I think that'll do it.
Okay.
Thank you.
We got our Dilligan Bridge. That was something that probably ought to be on some kind of interview.
You want to?
Okay.
I-
go ahead.
I
Just
carried
move
the first
on.
squad across the bridge at Dilligan. And I don't know.
Go ahead. What did you have to say about Dillian Bridge?
One of the most publicized actions that we had was capturing a bridge across the Danube River. The Danube was supposed to be Hitler's last natural barrier. And he had made a big deal about the Rhine River being his last natural barrier. And if you talk to some of the patents people, and the big deal in getting to the Rhine River, I shouldn't say this. Everybody wanted to get to the Rhine River and pee in it to salute Hitler. And we all got to laundry shopping, and here's the whole damn American army saluting Hitler. It's crossing, his last natural barrier, and here we are, and we were already across then up at Remagen. Patton joined him. Some of the people know that part of his history, and some don't. And I don't know if any of our men, you may talk to some who were part of it, or some who were not. But some of us did. And then the Danube River, Hitler wanted to get these people out of Italy, the 1.5 million Germans, and to make his last stand in Berchtesgaden, to have another big loss of life, if you please. And we were some 30 or 40 miles behind the German lines, and we were pulling point A Company 66 Armored Infantry. And you have a tank and a half track, tank and a half track, tank and a half track, and the lead tank cannon is shooting down the road, and this machine gun is taking care of this. The people on top of the tank with a 50 caliber, they're also taking care of the front. Behind that is a half track with a 50 caliber and machine guns on each side and one on the back. And we'll take care of this side, and the tank behind us has got its machine gun and cannon pointed this way. Behind it is the half track with its machine guns this way. Behind it a tank. So this tank doesn't have to come over here and shoot, and this one doesn't have to shoot. And you have about 5 tanks and 5 half tracks, and then you have the rest of the armored infantry, and then you have the tanks coming along back wherever they're needed. And when we start moving, it's awesome. And Germans were retreating in column into Deligan, and our tanks and half tracks went right up that column, and they were just off in the ditches and in the fields and running to the woods, and we kept going. And we couldn't kill them fast enough. And the reason you keep killing them is because if you let them live, that night they come back and get you. So you try to stop everything you can. And we got in, and the lead tank, several reports, mine and the other says we hit a mine. We didn't hit a mine. It's like hitting the river. We came up, and there was some mines kind of dug into the road. There were some depressions. But here was the bridge, and here was the river right there. So we say we hit some mines, but we didn't blow up a tank. We just got there. But when they did, the half-track pulled up, one on this side, one on this side, one on this side, one on this side. The tank's doing the same thing. And the ones on this side cover the windows and the top of the building this way, and the ones over here cover the windows if you're in town this way. And then when the column stops, you get out and clear the buildings right around you because it's too easy to throw a potato masher out or to shoot out of the window. Or the Panzerfaust is a big iron tank buster, Panzer iron fist that they use like our bazooka. So you get out and clear the houses around your half track. And you leave one on the machine gun in the driver, but you send the people out and they just clear right where you are. And we were out clearing the houses, and they sent word back, Porter, bring your squad up to the bridge. And when you got like 10 men, and I motioned to you, and you motioned to you, and you motioned to the next one, they got back 5 people, and then they didn't know where the other folks were, so instead of staying and looking for them, they came on. We had to go. And we went up to the bridge at Dilligan, and there were some tanks and sergeants up there, and they were already starting to cut some of the wires. when Jayot and Houston and Riddle got up on the bridge, there were 6 500-pound bombs on the bridge. And when we got up, there was a house right next to the bridge, and we went in. There were some Germans in there, so we went in, and I've got to write up in my car that he found 2 Germans in the basement, and the telephone kept ringing, and we were afraid if we lifted the phone, that would be the electrical energy to blow the bridge. And so we didn't answer the phone, but Makar found the 2 Germans in the basement, and he made them come out, and he was talking just terrible to them. Ralph, Ralph, Snell, Snell, come out, you know. And the Germans were laughing at him because his rifle was empty and the receiver was back. I mean, you could look down, there wasn't no bullets in it. But they were lucky to surrender anyway. So they came on out, and he captured the 2 Germans with the empty gun. So you'll hear that story about it at the house right by the bridge. Then Sergeant Riddell said, Porter, come on, take your squad across the bridge. And I took the 5 men that I had, and we went over around the big 500-pound bombs, went across the bridge, and I put a man on each side with a rifle. And it's shooting. I sent 2 down each side to cut the wires. And then I had a bridgehead of 6 men, and then after a while other people started coming over, and then when they moved the bombs, we were able to bring. Within 2 hours, Berlin knew that we had the bridge over the Danube River. And the planes came and started strafing us. And that day and the next day, we shot down 6 planes there. One of them fell within 100 yards of the bridge. One of the planes that was shot down, the pilot bailed out and his chute was on fire. I mean, he came on down. And Berlin Sally started talking to us the next day, and I can't find anyone else who heard her. And she would call out the men's names, the sergeants' names, and their wives, and the children, and say, you write them, because you may not be here tomorrow. We will blow up the bridge tonight at all costs. So a lot of them don't know why we were out protecting the bridge that night, but we were there because Berlin Sally. I can't find anybody else that knows why we were out that night in that position protecting the bridge, looking for paratroopers and bombs to come down and get it. The 12th Army, the 7th Army was pouring across the bridge, and then by then they had got some more ways to get across. The engineers had repaired some more. And while we were expecting the paratroopers, we heard an explosion in the river, and went and looked up the river, and the Germans had put these big sea mines with the spikes on them, floating down the Danube River. We're on both sides. And we're having to explode these things with rifles and machine gun fire. Finally got a tank up there to keep them while the engineers were notified to come and build the mine barriers across the Danube River. One of them had hit an old kind of a ship thing that was out there. But we finally got the barriers up, and then we got in our half-tracks and left it and went on down to the end of the war. But I carried the first squad across, set up a bridgehead with 5 men, and the bombs were a big deal. The dynamite, when we got on the other side, we looked back, and there was a chef of dynamite the entire width of a concrete bridge, about this wide and about that deep. Now, we didn't know the dynamite wouldn't go off. Once they started to remove it, they found out it was wet. But when you take a squad across and these bombs, and if anybody shoots one of them, we didn't know if they'd go off or not. And you're going to get cut off on the other side. We had quite an adventure. But anyway, love the 12th Army, proud of it, have the best time, and it's just a good feeling among the men.
Okay, we are here in Columbus, Ohio, with Lester Porter. This is the 52nd annual reunion for the 12th Armored Division. My name is Michelle Colvin, and we are doing a supplemental to an interview that we did a couple days ago with Lester Porter. Why don't you go ahead and tell us the story that you were thinking about?
I thought there was. Some people would be interested in knowing how the ladies and how the children were faring during the war and in the battles. And one particularly is a striking little story of a mother that had quite an experience. we had been fighting along in the German, we'd crossed the German border, we were fighting in the Germans, and came to a little town, and we'd cleared the town. But a little ways out from town was a train station, a house where the people lived that kind of conducted the train business. We thought we'd better go check it and make sure there wasn't any soldiers in there, anybody that would shoot us or anything. So took 2 or 3 men, and we went back to the little house. And the door wasn't locked. We just turned the handle in and opened the door and stepped inside. When we did, there was a little German fella, pretty little fella, about 3 years old, and he saw the soldiers. And the little fella snapped to attention and went, "Sieg Heil!" And when he did, his mother nearly fainted. She was over against the wall, and she had this shocked look on her face. And the other American soldiers and I, we stood there and looked at the little fella just a minute and said, "Sieg Heil, little Betty." And his mother called him. We couldn't understand what, but he ran over and she grabbed him up in her arms, and we went ahead and cleared the house. Came back out, and she was still standing there with little Sieg Heil in her arms. And we walked out, left the door open, but it was just such a shock to see the mother's face and her concern that we might blow the little fellow away. Another problem that the ladies had, we'd gone on and were fighting into an agricultural area. There was a farmhouse with a courtyard. And beyond the courthouse was a utility house. And we thought we'd better check that. And we cleared the house and the court. When we started back to the utility house, the ladies came out just screaming and jabbering. We couldn't understand. They were speaking their language, but it was real loud and real frantic. And they came out and called us, no. We said, "Oh, Lord, they got a darn tiger attack or something back there in that barn, or a whole company of soldiers." So we spread out in our best military form and went on down. And I went in, the door was latched, but I unlatched the door and stepped inside, and there were several retarded teenagers there. And Hitler had a policy of destroying defective people. He would just take them and, in order to purify the race, shoot the people who had problems. And the ladies had been protecting these young teenage children, and who didn't know what on earth we would do with them when we saw them. But we went ahead and checked the barn. There were no Tiger tanks and no German soldiers. Again, we walked out, left the door open, and the ladies went flying in there to try to get them quiet, because the children just didn't know what to think about this. And seeing the concern in the young mother and in the ladies who were looking after these young people was just such an impressive thing, and a very much part of the war. Everybody had children, beautiful daughters that they didn't know what happened to. And I just want to thank you again for letting me put this part in our interview.
Well, it's been a pleasure. We needed this. I thought that they were very important also, and so that's why we're here. So, if you can think of anything else, we'll be here to the next reunion in Houston, and would be happy to hear more of it. So, thank you so much.
Thank you